Mirrors by Greensearcher, Chapter 1, 10 years later. And although he had everything his heart desired, the prince was spoiled, selfish, and unkind, an old woman rasped. A dozen children and a crowd of weary workers gathered around her in the busy square. She grinned beneath her cloak, holding up a finger as she counted the tale. But then, one winter's night, an old beggar woman came to the door and offered him a single rose in return for shelter from the bitter cold. "Excuse me," someone interrupted, "but why would a prince be answering the door when he had a castle full of servants to do so?" The small crowd parted, revealing a young woman in the back, head cocked as she waited for her answer. The storyteller frowned. "Well, I'm not sure, my dear, but—" "And why would she ask the prince?" the girl asked curiously. "Where were the king and queen?" By now the old woman's eye was twitching in annoyance. "Why don't we just let the children enjoy the tale?" she said through gritted teeth. "Yeah, Belle, don't you have somewhere to be?" one of the men scoffed. "No," she replied honestly, settling down to listen at the edge of the fountain. A bead of sweat fell down the old storyteller's face. She cleared her throat. "Repulsed by her haggard appearance," she continued, "the prince sneered at the gift and turned the old woman away. To his dismay, the old woman's ugliness melted away to reveal a beautiful enchantress." The children laughed as the old woman framed her wrinkled face in imitation. "The prince tried to apologize," she went on, "but it was too late, for she had seen that there was no love in his heart. As punishment, she transformed him into a hideous beast and placed a powerful spell over the castle and all who lived there." "Seems a little harsh," Belle muttered to herself, unaware as the crowd turned back to look at her in exasperation. "I mean, how old was the prince anyway?" she asked, hand to her temple as she mused aloud, eyes fixed on the ground. "My dear!" "And to punish everyone else for his mistake? What did they have to do with it?" "My dear!" "Frankly, it sounds like this woman was just trying to cause trouble." Belle finally looked up, cheeks flushing a bit as she noticed the irritated glares from the crowd around her. She cleared her throat and shrugged. "Just wondering." "Young lady, it is only a tale," the old woman said, patience entirely gone as she scowled over the heads around them. Belle pouted a little bit, hopping off the ledge and skirting around the group. It'd be better if it were more believable, she thought to herself, making her way down the closest alleyway, ignoring the chattering voices behind her. Tucking herself into the shadows, Belle leaned against the crumbling building and sighed for a long moment, for pulling herself atop a nearby grate. Tucking a book from her satchel, she let the words consume her. She tried to forget for a moment the reality waiting for her at home. "Ah, if it isn't my favourite little bookworm!" The pages crinkled beneath her thumb as she looked up. Half a dozen men hobbling toward her from the street. They smelled of ale. "I was just on my way to relieve my father," she started anxiously, tucking the book away and moving to the opposite end of the street. A rough hand grabbed at her wrist, holding her in place. "You didn't seem in much of a hurry a minute ago," a rough voice spoke, dark eyes lusting down at her. "Please, Gaston! My mother will be needing her medicine soon." "Poor Belle," Gaston said, not a hint of sympathy in his voice. "Too bad there isn't a strong or wealthy man offering his hand. I'm sure a fellow could more than offset dear mother's doctor's bills." Belle frowned as the man behind them laughed. "Oh, wait, there is." He grinned, voice dripping with intoxication as he ran dirty fingers over her jaw. She held her breath, looking away as he leaned down. "Come on, what do you say?" he said, cocking his head at her. "Does he have to ask every day?" she thought irritably, tugging in vain against his hold. The thing that frightened her, however, was that the sicker the maman got, the more tempting his offer became. She shook her head against those thoughts. "Again, Gaston! No! Now please, I need to return home." Slipping from his loosened grip, she sprinted into the darkness. "You'll change your mind!" Gaston called out over the guffaws behind them, ragged feet shuffling back towards the bar. Belle ran the rest of the length of the village, ignoring the sceptical glances and trying to wipe away his invisible touch. And though she knew it was unlikely, She could swear the smell of alcohol still lingered on her clothes. The quiet chirping of the forest was a welcome relief to the evening streets, and she allowed her pace to slow as she climbed the tall slope towards their home along the outskirts of the town. A single candle burned in the window. This signalled that Maman was asleep. Creeping quietly along the back, she quickly rinsed her face and hands in the water barrel before slipping quietly into the house. It was strangely bare. The last unnecessary pieces of furniture recently sold in a desperate attempt to pay off the ever-staggering bills from the local medicine man. Belle squeezed her eyes shut in the darkness, trying to push the unhappy thoughts aside. Her empty stomach was enough to distract her, and she rummaged in one of the remaining cupboards for some supper. She took a meagre portion of bread and cheese, careful to leave enough for Papa, before moving quietly towards where her mother slept. To her surprise, it was not Papa, but a neighbour who sat by the bedside. The older woman's eyes were closed, chest rising and falling soundly. "Madame Genevieve?" Belle whispered, touching her neighbour's shoulder. "Madame, I'm back." The woman woke slowly, cracking her neck before she heaved herself out of the chair. "Oh, bonjour." "I am sorry, must have dozed off." "It's no trouble. Where's my father?" "Left not an hour ago. Said he had business in the east." Belle furrowed her brows. "That's all he told you?" "Mm-hmm," the woman affirmed, pulling on her cloak. "Well, I'd best be on my way. Need to get supper on the table." Digging her arm against her own growling stomach, Belle nodded. "Of course, mais..." She started, watching the door shut quickly behind the woman as she hurried away. "See?" Belle frowned. She stood alone in the darkness, the only light in the room from the candle beside her mother's bed. She knew the neighbours were growing weary of helping. It had been like this for over a year. She couldn't blame them. Besides, it's not like hers was the only family who was hungry. Sitting beside the bed, Belle reached out to hold on to her mother's hand, watching as the early moonlight poured in on them from the open window. Perhaps a stranger would have thought Maman looked peaceful, but Belle knew better. Noticing the uneven rise and fall of her chest as she slept, hearing the quiet rasping of her forced breaths, she swallowed roughly, the fear she had kept buried for months suddenly manifesting with no one to see. Maman was going to die. She knew it, even if she wouldn't admit it, and she knew the only chance they had of preventing it was to get her to Paris to see a true physician. But of course, there was only one way they could afford it. Maybe I should marry him," she told the darkness, hating herself for even considering it. A life with Gaston could only mean one thing: a life of subjugation, lost dreams, and most certainly abuse. But what else was she to do? Line break. "Master." The beast mumbled, only half listening, the fur from his chin brushing the pages as he read, eyes squinting against the fast-approaching twilight. "Master, there's someone here," the servant said, clearing his throat anxiously and swivelling around, as if expecting the intruder to be at the door. The beast's mind was still trapped in the author's world, a place where he didn't have to remember the monster he had become. It took him a few moments before he looked up. "Oh, Cogsworth. My apologies. How can I help you?" The little mantel clock's hands were spinning at a nervous pace. "Master, we believe there's a thief in the castle." The master furrowed his brows for a long, confused moment, before his eyes grew wide. "What? But how did they get in?" He hopped off the balcony ledge, tossing the book aside as he moved quickly into the hall. "Did we leave the gates open? Dieu," he swore. "It's been years since... How did they... Never mind," he huffed, stopping as he realised he had no idea where to go. Cogsworth caught up to him a moment later, completely breathless. "Master!" he panted, pointing in the opposite direction. "He's in the kitchens!" The beast swallowed roughly. "All right, I'll go down. Has he seen anyone?" Cogsworth looked even more anxious. No one moving, my lord," he swallowed. "But there wasn't exactly time for anyone to leave." And the beast felt his chest grow tight as he leapt over the railing and slid quickly, if ungracefully, down the long curtains to the ground floor below. He sprinted on all fours towards the southern wing, bounding down the stairs to the dark kitchens below. A single candle burned in the darkness, its flames flickering nervously in the quiet room. Lumiere, he realised, walking over and picking him up gently. Where? The master breathed, the one-word question hovering in the air. He felt the brass in his hands nudge him towards the storage room. Moving closer, he could hear the quiet stacking of dishes from the other side of the closed doors. Pushing his way quickly inside, the beast stared in fury at a dark figure in the shadows, several stacks of fine china being loaded inside a wicker basket. His animal-like hearing caught the sounds of silverware trembling in their drawers, of plates quaking fearfully in the thief's dirty hands. The intruder looked up in alarm, gasping in terror at the monster in the doorway. "What are you doing?" the master snarled, taking 2 long steps towards him. The man was unable to respond aside from a few choked cries as he backed up against the wall. The beast broke out in a sweat as it was clear the man could very well drop the plates in surprise. Rushing over, the beast grabbed the tableware away as the man fell to the ground in a panicked heap. Exhaling in relief, he set the servants carefully in a cupboard before leaning over and gathering a handful of the thief's cloak in one paw. What are you?" the man finally blurted out, staring up at him in horror. "I am the master of this castle," the beast said darkly, feeling the anger building in his chest. "And I do not tolerate thieves of any kind here." "I didn't realise. I thought it was abandoned," the man confessed, still shaking in fear. The master's frown deepened. "You thought that as you broke through the gates?" he asked sceptically. Realising he had been caught in a lie, the man began to beg. "Please, please!" he whispered, tears forming in his eyes as he wrung his hands together. "My wife, she's very ill. I've sold everything I can to try to afford her care, but we can't survive another winter and continue to pay for—" He trailed off, looking miserable. The beast only stared at him, distracted. He hadn't seen human expression in so long. The man's misery was overwhelming to witness, and almost frightening. Forcing himself into the present, he thought for several long minutes as the man wept, wishing he could consult with the others. Of course, they knew not to let outsiders see them move or speak. It was risky enough to let the man see the beast at all. They certainly didn't want more curious or violent intruders. The master finally sighed. "I cannot give my possessions away freely," he said, the word choice poor but necessary. "Especially these. This set is, very special to me," he continued awkwardly, glancing back at the cupboards. "But I can pay you with old coin, but it should suffice. And only if you provide me service in return." He would have liked to just give the man the money and be rid of him, but it wouldn't do to spread the word that the castle was suddenly a place of free handouts, especially if people expected those handouts to be the fine china still trembling in fear behind them. The beast looked the man over. His tall, worn boots were caked in mud, and a wide-brimmed hat hung by a string around his neck. "A farmer. Have you any experience with horses? We could use a stableman," he offered. The man looked at him as if to see him for the first time. "This is a generous offer, my lord," he said slowly, still looking troubled. "But I cannot be away from my family too long. She's nearly gone as things are," he said, no longer appearing so sad, but as he did a man who had completely given up. "Our local healer can do nothing more. We must take Soleil to the city if there is any hope for her recovery." He stopped, bowing his head hopelessly. The master's heart clenched in his chest as he thought of his own mother. "You said you have children?" he asked. "One, my lord." The beast glanced away, trying and failing to detach this child's experience from his own long ago. "All right," he conceded, sighing deeply. "All right." He turned and moved towards the door. The man stayed on the ground for a long, puzzled moment, before scrambling to his feet and following the castle's master out of the door and up the long stairwell. Without looking back, the beast instructed him carefully. "You have been working here for many months now." What?" "And I am simply compensating you for your service," he continued, reaching the top and guiding them towards one of the offices in the southern wing. He heard the man gasp quietly behind him, finally putting the pieces together. "Yes, my lord, of course. the father replied, a silent agreement that the beast's liberality not being mentioned outside the walls. A half-hour later, the man finished securing 2 large bags of coin to his saddle, cheeks wet with gratitude as he offered a silent bow, and climbed atop his horse. As the animal's clattering steps faded into the night air, the master allowed a myriad of feelings to flood his chest. "That was very kind of you, my lord," Lumiere said, finally turning towards him from his hand. "And dangerous would be more accurate," a fretful voice echoed from the open doorway behind them. "He tried to steal from you, master," Cogsworth said in disapproval. "I nearly gave Mrs. Potts a heart attack." The candlestick grinned. "Lumiere, I don't believe that's possible given our current condition." "Oh, hush. All I'm saying is this could come back to hurt us," Cogsworth replied anxiously. The beast pursed his lips. "I know. It was foolish, and I am sorry for putting you all in danger," he said quietly, brows furrowing as the real implication of his generosity set in. Would they come seeking riches? He knew he couldn't care for all the northern France, but as much as he would have liked to, or as much as he should have been, had things turned out differently. "But he seemed a good man, just desperate. I believe this is the last we will hear of this," the master said decidedly, effectively ending the conversation. Little did he realize that he would hear more of it quite soon. Line break. "Papa! Where have you been?" Maurice slid off the horse, the only work animal they had left, letting his daughter wrap 2 fretful arms around him, where he stood. "I was worried sick," she murmured into his coat before pulling back. "Are you hurt? Were you lost? Sacre bleu, were you attacked? Or—" He put a finger to her lips. "Belle, you really do ask a lot of questions." He smiled. She grinned sheepishly. "But not too many." "Never too many," he agreed, giving her a wink. She looked at him strangely for a long moment, undoubtedly curious not only as to his disappearance, but his sudden lightened spirits. He let her wait for a long minute, watching from the corner of his eye as she bounced her knee and chewed her lip in anticipation. The girl's curiosity never did die down, even as she entered into early womanhood. He hoped it never did. Pulling the bags of currency off Philippe's back, Maurice handed one to his daughter. "Take a look," he said eagerly. She undid the strings in haste, tucking the corners of the pouch open and looking inside. Her eyes grew wide, but instead of joy she looked upset. "Papa, where did you get this?" she asked, face streaked with worry. She looked up at him. "God has blessed us, my child," he said, holding the other bag to his chest. She frowned further. "Papa, where did you get this?" she replied. He sighed. "It was a gift, Belle." "A gift?" she said slowly, clearly unconvinced. "From a generous overlord I met on my travels," he assured her. "A generous overlord in the middle of the forest?" He remained quiet, unpacking Philippe and handing her the reins as he hauled his packs over his back. "And you're sure you didn't steal it?" she said, looking at him skeptically. Maurice shook his head, swallowing the tinge of guilt from knowing that he had tried to steal from their benefactor, that the trip's entire purpose had been to steal from a distant village and escape before their local authorities could catch him. His own innate curiosity, leading him down that hidden shady fork in the road, had merely been a stroke of good luck. "But who would give you so much?" Belle went on. "Papa, this could feed us for months." She glanced at the second bag he held, eyes growing wide. "For years." "Or take your mother to Paris." She stopped breathing for a moment, reality sinking in. "Papa," was all she could say, looking like the world had been lifted from her shoulders. Maurice was glad of it. No one her age deserved such a burden as she had been feeling recently. "Papa," she managed again, swallowing slowly. "Where did you meet this man?" He only shrugged, anxious to avoid an explanation. In truth, he was still a bit shaken up from the encounter himself. Belle tied Philippe up quickly and was soon at his heels as he returned to the door. "Well then, how was your journey?" she asked casually, as if nothing were amiss. Maurice raised an eyebrow at her change of the subject. "It was fine." "Did you stay at the Forêt Inn?" "No," Maurice replied slowly. "Oh, so you must have taken the southern pass." "No, I took the northern. Just bypassed the Narrows instead of—" He stopped abruptly, noticing Belle's eyes shining with accomplishment. All right, I take back what I said earlier. That's too many questions. He huffed, nervous that he had already given too much away. By the look of triumph on her face, he was certain that he certainly had. Belle, he said sternly. What? She asked in innocence. Belle, it doesn't matter where the money came from, he said firmly. It's going to get your mother better. And that's what's important. Her expression softened, and she nodded in agreement. Relaxing a little, Maurice let her into the house to tell Soleil the good news. Goodbye, Maman, Belle whispered, kissing her pale forehead and holding back tears. I love you. Love you too, her mother said quietly. Please, please stay safe. I will, Belle promised. Maurice, are you sure she'll be all right? Her mother asked before starting into a fresh coughing fit. Belle's father propped his wife up on his lap as they sat in the back of the crowded wagon, pulling another blanket over her. She's a smart girl. She's got Max to guard her. He reassured her. Right, boy? The large brown-grey mutt gave a loud bark in reply. Unable to contain his excitement at the presence of so many newcomers, he ran in circles around the wagon. Belle caught the driver grumble irritably at that they ought to be leaving soon. Papa's right, she told her mother. And who else will take care of Max and Philippe while you're gone? Maman gave her a worried smile. All right. I'll try to get better soon, so you're not alone too long. Belle nodded bravely, though they both knew it would be several months at least before they'd see each other again. Pursing her lips to keep the tears at bay for a little longer, Belle gave her mother's hand one long squeeze and let Papa plant a kiss onto her temple. With a crack of the whip, the driver sent his team of horses toward the dusty road. Au revoir! Belle called out, waving for as long as the wagon was in sight. She's going to get better, she told herself as the wagon crested the hill. I'm going to see her again. A few minutes later, Belle brushed her eyes against her sleeve, took a deep breath, and got to work. It had only took a few hours to brush down Philippe, give Max a much-needed bath, and clean up their small home. She packed away her parents' bed and rearranged what little furniture remained to her liking before taking a well-deserved break for lunch. Another couple of hours passed, and she had finished the book she had lent from the town the day before, and found herself on the rooftop, gazing over the valley with an old sketchbook in hand, trying to squeeze one more drawing in the corner of one of the crowded pages. Not another hour went by, and she sighed deeply. I'm bored, she realized, blowing a few strands of her hair out of her eyes. She wasn't used to such empty days. For months she had been putting almost all her effort into her mother's care. And now she felt oddly useless. She gazed over the open valley, wondering what lay beyond its edges, wondering what kind of place her father had gone to where overlords handed out bags of money like pocket change. Belle, it doesn't matter where the money came from. Belle tilted her head as she thought. It may not matter, she thought mischievously, but I'd sure like to find out anyway. End of chapter. Hi guys, hope you enjoyed that, because as I've said before, this is one of my favourite Beauty and the Beast fanfictions ever. I actually saw the stage show of Beauty and the Beast at the London Palladium only yesterday, and it's really got me on a kick of this. So I hope you enjoy this, and oh, I love this idea that Belle is actually struggling with wanting to marry Gaston because it's to help her sick mother, and that the Beast isn't this monster, he's just someone who's trying. I love that. In the stage show, they actually made the Beast more repentant as to when he scared Belle before she ran off into the wolves. It was like he was instantly, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to scare you. Are you hurt? But she ran away anyway. Like, that's a nice touch. It's a very nice touch. And when he lets her go to let her see her father when he's lost in the woods, he said, you're not a prisoner. You haven't been for a long time. Just that one addition of that line. She wasn't a prisoner. I love that. And I have a feeling she's not going to be in this one. Well, you guys know I've already read this one quite a few times already. I reread it before I started recording so that I'd have it fresh in my mind. Anyway, you guys know the drill. Check out my other videos. Remember to like, comment and subscribe, and hit that bell to get notified whenever I upload a new video. Have a good day, night, or whatever time zone you're in. Bye my guys, gals and non-binary pals. I'll see you in another video. Bye!